So the Animist is a complicated class, and part of the reason for that is all the apparitions you can pick from each day. Hello, team players. Today I'm going to be going over all 10 of the apparitions you can pick from as an Animist. So you can pick which ones you want to attune to each day, and which to make your primary. Let's dive in. Now before we get into this, there are a few things you should know. Number one, this is not a tier list. I do not do tier lists on this channel because I find that every option is effective if used in the right situation. But those of you that have been with the channel for a while know that I will tell you when I think a option is too situational, and which options I think are very good, and give you a general idea of why I think they're too situational, or they're really, really good. Secondly, in this video, I'm mostly going to focus on the vessel spells, which are the focus spells of the Animist. As number one, the spells you get from these apparitions are all in other books, and you guys can look them up just fine. And the avatar forms of these apparitions you don't get until level 19, which most campaigns aren't even going to go anywhere near that far. But all the information will be on screen. And lastly, with the Animist being such a complicated class, I will be doing a few videos on the Animist before we get to the build, which will be the second build in my Divine Brigade party. With all that out of the way, let's get into these apparitions. I'm going to start with a very good one with Crafter in the Vaults. You become trained in architecture lore and engineering lore. You also get spells that help you create stuff, like creation, sigil, that sort of thing. But the big thing here is the vessel spell, Traveling Workshop. For one action, for the next minute, you become trained in crafting and thievery. But that's just the start. When you cast the spell, and as long as you sustain it, you have access to alchemist tools, a repair kit, and a thieves toolkit. These are magical and disappear as soon as they leave your possession. But this effectively means you don't have to spend gold on these items at character creation, since you get this focus spell immediately upon making an Animist. In addition, if you're something like an alchemist or any crafting character, you can simply use this spell, then use something like Quick Alchemy to make the item, and then use your third action to use the item. It's pretty great. The action economy isn't great, but this does allow you to use items more effectively in combat. In addition, you can spend 10 minutes casting this spell, and it lasts for a full 8 hours. Meaning, you can use this outside of combat to make all sorts of things. Great with crafting feats. This also works extremely well on shields, especially if you have the quick repair skill feat. Unfortunately, you cannot use this apparition to earn income, and any item you make during downtime disappears the moment it leaves your hands. So it's pretty unwise to create any item that you're not going to use yourself. But this is an excellent apparition for bomber alchemists, as it only disappears moments after you make the item. So that means bombs will still work. So if you're an alchemist with the Animist archetype, or you're an Animist with the alchemist archetype, this is a fantastic apparition to pick up. Next we have Custodian of Groves and Gardens. This gives you farming lore and herbalism lore. In addition, this gives you plant-based spells like you would expect, things like Tanglevine, Protector Tree, and Field of Life. The vessel spell for this apparition is actually really good at healing. You create a 10-foot emanation, and When you cast a spell and the first time you sustain it every round, every creature in that emanation heals for 1d4 hit points. In addition, once the spell ends, each creature that was healed by it receives a +1 circumstance bonus on saves against emotion effects. This lasts for 10 minutes. However, as long as this bonus persists, the creatures cannot be healed by this spell. This one is great if all your party members are in one area in a 10-foot emanation, as they just get healed every single round. This does have the aura trait, which means it is centered on you. But if you move, that means it moves with you, which is pretty fantastic, especially for certain other apparitions, which we'll get to later. Echo and Lost Moments is okay. If you want to be an illusion animist, this is the one you want to take, because it gives you fortune-telling lore and genealogy lore, and a bunch of illusion spells like Figment and things like that. But the focus spell for this isn't great. Basically, with Store Time, when you cast a spell and each time you sustain it, you gain an extra reaction you can use for any animist or apparition reaction you have. But of course, you have to use it before the end of your turn, otherwise it just goes away. Unfortunately, right now, there aren't a whole lot of reactions you can use with this spell. More than other spellcasters, sure, but not that many. I mean, you could use this to combine something like Aid and then still use an Animist reaction, but other than that, I don't think this particular focus spell is all that great, to be perfectly honest with you. But if you want the illusion spells, this is the one you want to take. If you want to be a stealthy animist, then Imposter in Hidden Places is definitely an apparition for you. This one gives you a lot of spells like Mislead and Invisibility, as well as fortune-telling lore and underworld lore. The Discomforting Whispers Vessel spell is a great way to discourage enemies from attacking you, as each creature in that area must succeed at a will saving throw or have disadvantage on all their attack rolls. In addition, if they miss, they take 1d6 void damage. This combined with high-level fear means they're going to be taking damage every time they try to attack us, as long as they miss, of course. Even more of a reason for enemies to go after the tank rather than you. Of course, it's only if they start their turn in the area and not just if they're in the area. So, they can move into the area and not take this, but still. This is a good way to waste actions on the enemy, because if they're having to move back and forth, they're not going to be able to attack you as much. And they're still going to have disadvantage, because sometimes they are going to have to start their turn in the area. And while void damage doesn't work on all enemies, it does work on a lot of them. I would definitely consider this one as well. If you're looking for a damaging option for an apparition, then Lurker in the Devouring Dark might be for you. It has a lot of acid and cold spells in it, like Caustic Blast and Frost Pillar. It also gives you ocean lore and sailing lore. However, the focus spell is a little situational. I would only make this apparition your primary if you're in an aquatic campaign or like a ship campaign or something. Or if you wanted to be a melee animist, which definitely can be a thing. With Devouring Dark form, your arms and legs turn into tentacles, giving you an unarmed attack that deals 1d8 bludgeoning damage and has the grapple trait. In addition, the first time you sustain the spell every round, you can make a grapple check at a 10-foot reach. And once you can cast this spell at second rank, you can transform into a shark rather than gaining tentacles. The first time you sustain the spell each round, you can make a Jaws unarmed attack. And once you can cast 5th rank spells, you can transform into a water elemental, which allows you to use an unarmed attack every time you sustain the spell. This particular aberration has great damaging spells. The problem is that vessel spell. You kind of need to be near water in order for this spell to be most effective, especially if you heighten it to second rank. As if you're a shark, you need water. So the vessel spell is pretty situational, but the rest of the spells in this aberration are fantastic, especially if the enemy is weak to acid or cold. It's even got Aqueous Orb in here, which I've used to great effect before. So I would say pick up this aberration, but don't make it your primary unless you are near water. Next up is Monarch of the Fey Courts. Art lore and Fey lore, plus spells like Tanglevine, Dominate, and Charm. The Vessel spell is another great one for getting enemies to attack someone else other than you. And unlike Discomforting Whispers, this one only affects enemies, not any creature in the area. With Nymph's Grace, you create a 10-foot emanation aura around you, and each time an enemy enters the area or starts their turn in the area, they have to make a will saving throw. Should they fail, they become confused for 1 round. And if they are confused, their confused actions never include harming you, specifically. They can still attack allies, or even better, themselves, but they can never harm you, specifically. Like I said, another great way of keeping enemies off you so that you can help your team with your other spirits. I definitely recommend this one. And we've got another one like that with Reveler of Lost Glee. This is another illusion spell one. Circus lore and fortune-telling lore, and it gives you a lot of illusion spells. For example, Laughing Fit, Confusion, Hypnotize, and even Wails of the Damned. The Vessel spells Trickster's Mirrors is sort of like Mirror Image. You surround yourself with up to 3 mirrors. You get 1 mirror to start with, and you get an extra mirror every time you sustain this spell, up to 3. Any attack that would hit you has a random chance of targeting a mirror instead, depending on how many mirrors you have. Once a mirror is hit, it is destroyed. And if an attack would miss you, but not critically miss you, it destroys a mirror. If a creature is within 5 feet of a mirror when it breaks, they must make a basic will save or take 1d4 mental damage as they believe they are cut by the mirror shards. Any area damage that would affect all targets in your space destroys all mirrors. This is another one that discourages particularly melee attackers from attacking you, as if they destroy a mirror, they're taking mental damage. And this heightens pretty well too. So, this is another way of getting enemies to not attack you and attack something like the tank instead. And remember that every time you sustain the spell, you get a new mirror. Which means even if an enemy destroys a mirror, you'll just replace it on the next turn. Pretty great spell here. If you want to be an animist that transforms into other forms like an untamed druid, then Stalker in the Darkened Boughs is the apparition for you. This one gives you forestry lore and hunting lore, as well as a lot of spells that are on the primal list, such as Gouging Claw, Monstrosity Form, and Bestial Curse, as well as Moon Frenzy. The Vessel spell allows you to change as if you had cast the Pest Form spell, but you can change your form every time you sustain this spell. At higher levels, you can even transform into the forms listed in animal form and elemental form. Plus, this one does lead to feats that allow you to transform into even more forms. Honestly, if you're wanting to transform into animals but don't want to be a druid, this is the apparition you want. The Steward of Stone and Fire is a damaging option, obviously. It gives you Mountain Lore and Volcano Lore, as well as spells like Ignition, Fireball, and Earthquake. But Earth's Bile is one of the best damaging focus spells I've ever seen. But not because of its damage. Its damage is actually pretty mediocre. What makes Earth Bile so good is its area combined with one simple fact. You can move it. Yeah, you can have this pop up anywhere within 30 feet each round you sustain it, and when you cast the spell, obviously. The simple fact that you can move it means that enemies are taking this damage every round pretty much no matter what. And if they do decide to move out of it, then they may take other penalties from other party members. Like say, I don't know, how about the fighter's reactive strike? Because it's a 10-foot burst, they're not just stepping their way out of this, unless, of course, they can step 10 feet, which some enemies might be able to do that, but most enemies will not. And because this does persistent fire damage on a failed save, you don't even have to have them in the area for them to be taking damage, which means you can hit multiple enemies with this. You do have to be careful with this because it's all creatures in the area and not just your enemies. But because it's only a 10-foot burst, you're going to be able to pretty easily hit just enemies with this. This gives this spell fantastic versatility. Granted, if they're immune to fire, this probably isn't the best spell to use against them. But against pretty much anything else, pretty great. And even if they are immune to fire, this does do bludgeoning damage as well. Not a great amount of bludgeoning damage, but bludgeoning damage. And if they happen to be weak to fire, this becomes insane. But yes, if you wanted to be a damage-dealing Animist, this is one you want to pick up. If you want to push enemies around and control water, then Vanguard of Roaring Waters is the apparition you want. It gives you Mountain Lore and River Lore, in addition to a lot of water spells like Rousing Splash, Hydraulic Push, and Hydraulic Torrent. Unfortunately, the focus spell, the vessel spell for this particular aberration is okay. It's not great. With River Carving Mountains, for the duration of the spell, you have lesser cover against ranged attacks and gain a plus 10-foot status bonus to all your speeds. In addition, every time you sustain this spell, and when you first cast it, you can stride up to your speed. This creates difficult terrain everywhere you move until the start of your next turn. You can also use this spell with different movement types if you have them. Sadly, this spell only creates difficult terrain until the start of your next turn, and in a lot of situations, it's hard to create this difficult terrain in a way that actually hampers enemies because it's wherever you move. And as a spellcaster, you're not exactly going to be in a position to go into melee. But this could be good with the last aberration I'm going to talk about today, which of course is Witness to Ancient Battles, which gives you Battlegrounds lore and Heraldry lore. You get a lot of battle-based spells from this aberration, things like Shield, Enlarge, and Weapon Storm. Embodiment in Battle is particularly good if you want to be a melee Animist. This one is honestly pretty good with the Darkened Forest form from an apparition I talked about earlier in this video. Of course, you have to cast this and then go into your form, but this does give you a +1 to all your attack and damage rolls with weapons and unarmed attacks, in addition to the reactive strike reaction. But for the duration of this spell, you take a -2 penalty on your spell attack rolls and your spell DCs, because you're trying to be melee, and this runs counterintuitive to magic. But this detriment really doesn't matter if you're casting spells that don't have spell attack rolls or DCs, such as, transformation spells. You do have to sustain both this spell and the Darkened Forest form, but at least you get one attack in, or movement, or something. And if you get hasted, this becomes absolutely insane. So Animist can 100% be melee spellcasters if you want them to be, and pretty good ones at that. And the bonus this spell gives does go up as you level. Of course, you would need the Circle of Spirits feat in order to use this effectively. However, it is a good combo. This is also really good with Lurker and the Devouring Dark. But this combo would take a lot of setting up in the beginning. But once it's up, it's actually pretty good. And that's every single apparition you can pick for the Animist right now. Before I leave you guys, there are a couple things I need to talk about. First, remember that Animists get 4 of these eventually every single day that they can change. And remember that you only get the focus spell if it's your primary apparition. If it's not, then you just get the spells and the lore. Which honestly, a lot of these, I think, are better as secondary apparitions. As with some of these, the spells are really good, but the apparition vessel spell isn't great. Next, I do have a few more videos planned for the Animist, and then we'll get into the Exemplar, as I do want to get both of those out before Divine Mysteries comes out in about a month. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like, and check out the links in the description below, particularly my Patreon page if you want to see these videos early. Or you can just become a member of the channel. Up to you. Also, I am working on my Divine Brigade party, which an Animist will be a part of that. But if you want to see the first build in that party, you can check out this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.